let me ask you our first question this week. Sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Denny in Birmingham, England. Once again, Jim, a popular topic, Cody Rhodes. What are your thoughts on your old pal Dutch Mantell and his thoughts on Cody Rhodes? Do you see the same happening, and do you agree? And here's the quote from...
I was about to say, tell me what he said.
Allegedly from Dutch. We don't know where this is actually sourced from. It doesn't have that here. This is what I fear. I fear Cody going there, and he'll be a big deal 1 week, 2 weeks, and the third week, he's slack. Then the fourth week, he's fading into the background. By the sixth week, all the buzz is gone, and he's just another guy. That's what I fear, because that's what they have shown us as what they can do. Cody is not anywhere near the star his daddy was. I don't think he's anywhere near the star his brother was. Is he going to be Cody Rhodes? Is he going to have some kind of Starman gimmick? I think he's a good addition, but I don't see him moving the needle at all.
Well, it's always hard to argue with Dutch's wrestling logic, and it's hard to argue with that. We've seen both companies. Somebody gets signed, they're a needle mover. The ground will shake, the earth will change, and in 6 weeks later, they're one of the boys or one of the girls. That's common these days. Of course, Cody's not the level of star as his father. Almost nobody else is either. At one time, Dusty Rhodes was one of the 3 or 4 biggest box office attractions in the wrestling business, and Cody's never occupied that spot, and a lot of other people haven't either, so that's not any, knock on Cody. Honestly, goddamn, Goldust was a pretty big name when a lot more people were watching the fucking wrestling business.
And more non-wrestling fans, for good reason and bad reason, were aware of Goldust than Cody Rhodes, I think.
And, I mean, let's be honest. Dustin didn't do the moonsault off the top of the cage or set himself on fire on purpose or whatever the fuck, but it's been talked about that Dustin at his age now is probably, he's the modern day equivalent of Nick Bockwinkel, early 50s and still working at a high level. Dustin probably was a better worker at his height than Cody is now, but Cody, to be honest, even though some of them have taken a tragic turn, Cody's a better talker than Dustin was. So everything that Dutch said there is, I mean, he wasn't predicting it was going to come to pass. It was what he was afraid of, and I think there's good reason to see that scenario taking place, or at least to prognosticate about it.
I don't think Cody's a better talker than Dustin. I think Dustin, especially now at this point, Dustin comes across real, but he's not doing really serious promos out there. But whenever he does talk, doesn't come across like a guy doing a performance. As Goldust, nobody could have done Goldust better than Dustin did. Period.
Yeah.
Whether you liked it or not.
I was about to say, for good or bad, we always have to add that.
Cody's always doing a rah-rah pep rally speech that he's worked at in his head before time. And it always comes across that way.
He hears Dusty in his head when he does the glorious promos with a lot of metaphors and things like that, but Dusty just brought it out of his ass on the spot. And
Dusty did a lot of promos every week. I mean, I think sometimes it feels like Cody just tries to channel the big promos that people focus on now, but we've said this before. I never heard any tape traders or anyone in the 90s talk about the Hard Times promo. And that wasn't a big deal amongst fans in terms of the great promos of all time until like the early 2000s when they put it on DVD.
Yeah.
But there were lots of other promos that really got Dusty over. He would come out and just talk to people and seem, as ridiculous as he seemed real.
Yeah. Well, and now somebody out there is going to say, oh, now they're knocking the Hard Times promo. No, we're not. What we're saying is that the Hard Times promo, by virtue of it being on the DVD release and a blah, 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 got a lot of people into it. All of Dusty's promos were in the range of that or comparable to or local promos, depending on how much time he had or whatever. It wasn't like that was a standout moment in his promo catalog. There were all kinds of great ones. He did those, like I said, he'd do them out of his ass. And he would, at TBS, he'd be sitting in the control room because he was nominally the producer of the program, right? So he's sitting in there with the monitors and the director and the technical director and watching the show and seeing what's going on and giving JJ would stand right by where Dusty sat. And he'd give JJ a note or a comment or whatever, and JJ might run it out. If JJ wasn't there because he was out on camera, I used to go in the control room and peek a lot, especially, when I was coming up soon. So I was watching the monitor, seeing what was on the program, but also I could watch the director call the shots. Also, I could just watch Dusty do what Dusty did. And then whenever his segment was up, he'd just stand up, walk around there, cut a promo like that, come back around, sit back down, and start producing the rest of the show. It wasn't like he was pacing back and forth, desperately trying to remember what he'd memorized that he wanted to talk about. It was completely off the top of his fucking head. He knew what he wanted to sell. He just waited till he got out there to do the pitch.
Yeah, I don't think Cody could do that.
It's not looking that way. But that's, like you said, Dusty he looked preposterous if you had no idea who he was, what he was. And then once you started listening to him, then you started kind of getting it. But it was Dusty. It was Dusty turned up, just like all the guys. But, without context, sometimes things can look either better or worse than they were, but Dusty's promos were always good. I mean, context is the Bloody Variant action figure on sale Saturday, April 2nd at noon Eastern at JimCornette.com. I was sitting when I was looking at him, getting some out of the box. There's some poor old Chinese lady that works at this toy factory, sitting there with a paintbrush, painting goddamn blood splashes on a white dinner jacket and blood on this guy's head. She has no idea. She don't know what professional wrestling is. She has no context of it. She's thinking, what the fuck's the matter with these Americans? And is this like what they do to people in the streets? Have they bloodied this man and they're going to hang him in effigy or something?
He's in such a nice suit.
Yes, he looks like a maitre d'. And, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with when you see some of the wrestlers that were huge stars in different eras, but you don't know what about them, how they were presented, how they spoke. You just see the picture. You go, what the fuck? But with Dusty, that's why he used, God, who did it? Was it George Thorogood? Can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Or no, it was, goddamn. It was Bo Diddley. Do you remember when he used that music?
I remember the music. I'm not sure. I'm familiar with Bo Diddley's earlier stuff, not his later work.
Well, you make him sound like goddamn Picasso there.
Well, no, his first few albums are actually pretty extraordinary. The sound that he was able to get on those first few records. And he's also the first guy to realize how smart it was to just talk about yourself in every song.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what album.
Well, anyway, you
Dusty's
can't judge a book by looking at the cover. That was Dusty's music.
You know what some people just need to understand? Sometimes you can judge a book by the cover. I have a pretty big library. There are certain books, you look at the cover, you can figure out exactly what it is. But anyway, Jim.
I remember a Dumbo Does It Donkey Style. When I got that cover of that book, I instantly knew.
Oh, it was a book. That surprises me. I didn't realize that was a book.
It was a Tijuana Bible.
Oh, okay. I have a collection of those, actually.
I understand you wrote and starred in a few of them.
I have the Jim Landis Tijuana Bible. How about that?
He was Greek, though.
He was, and that's
Yes.
why
It
the
was
theme of this
reinforced in that book.
that's why the theme of this
Reinforced in that book.
that's why the theme of that was some things that people say about Greek people, at least they did back then. But let's get another question here, Jim.